PT, happy Kinetic Linking Friday. Today we're going to begin our journey through what we call Transformational Zone 2 of Gait, so for walking. We'll progress into running at some point in time, but we're going to kind of expand upon the transition of that Transformational Zone, that TZ1 into TZ2. What helps me think of TZ2, a couple different things. I like to first think of this little colored block set with all these different little shapes that you have to kind of put in just the right spot. So teaching our little guys colors and the right holes to go into is pretty unique and actually a little bit challenging. A few of them kind of appear as if they should go, like this guy right here, this little diamond shaped guy, but doesn't quite fit, doesn't quite match, so it doesn't work. There you go. There's the diamond I was looking for. So even for an adult, or myself anyways, this would be a pretty challenging thing. I think of kind of movement and function kind of similar regards to this block set, being able to name the right color, being able to put it in the right spot. TZ2 also reminds me of this little Slinky here. We've all kind of played with these guys growing on up, and how this old vintage little tin-like Slinky, when you put him at the top of the step, and when he starts to kind of go, keeps going and going and going, and he keeps building up speed as he continues to just kind of to wind and load, to get long, to allow that momentum to kind of carry him throughout. Transformational Zone 2 of Gait also reminds me of kind of this little Lego set. I love Legos and Lincoln Logs playing on up. So these little guys in their little car right here, kind of well anchored with their little Lego-like feet. Got a little monkey right here. Got some movement throughout, so we can set up this huge link of them, which our little guy does. Just kind of play around a little bit, kind of design and create, kind of lock some things into place. It's here in Transformational Zone 2 of Gait that we start to take advantage of the mobility that we have in TZ1, that three-dimensional pronation, that loading, to refer back and to re-highlight to what we've talked about before. We talked about TZ1 kind of being like that domino-like effect. Things kind of falling and collapsing into place at the right time, at the right speed. Kind of picking up speed, any kind of shape and any kind of direction. We also talked about TZ1 being that washcloth, that ringing out like effect. Well, here we can still make a very good case that it's still that washcloth like effect. So TZ2 of Gait, if I were to take my left foot, TZ1, I absorb and brace the resistance of our body weight, gravity, momentum, inertia, and ground reaction force. As that leg, as that lower extremity, as that body kind of absorbs those resistances kind of three-dimensionally, we then have a transition of the right leg past, kind of forward, beyond kind of the left leg, which gives us our Transformational 2, Zone 2 of Gait. So with the right foot right here, as we in TZ1 to kind of re-highlight, the calcaneus everted, which then kind of spun off this chain reaction. It allowed the talus to drop down and in. That ball and socket joint at that talonavicular joint, we had relative we had dorsiflexion, we had eversion, we also had relative abduction, so in the transverse plane, which allowed this midfoot to kind of disassociate from kind of the rear foot and to kind of unlock things, to give us that ringing out like effect, so that we could store and gather energy like the washcloth thrown into the bucket. We then had the raise, that pronation, supination, twist kind of phenomenon, in which the first and the second toe got a little closer to the shin and inverted, and the fourth and the fifth ray went a little further away. They plantar flexed and they inverted as well. So here in TZ2 of Gait, As we've loaded and as that tibia continues to translate kind of forward over the rear foot, over that talus, and into the midfoot a little bit, at this point, we in TZ2, the body, it's still going to continue to load, but now this heel is going to invert. This heel is going to invert, which is going to start to lock up that mid-tarsal joint to give us something firm and solid to be able to push off of, like the Lego set. We need this slinky-like effect to continue to take place, like that wet washcloth, from toes to heel, and from heel up through the legs. We need the right joints, the right sequence of joints, moving in the right directions, right planes, at the right speeds, at just the right time, just like being able to find the right shape and color for this box right here. So as that calcaneus inverts, as it inverts, the talus then is swooped up and in. So instead of the plantar flexion and adduction that we had in TZ1, we have a dorsiflexion of the talus. So instead of him dropping down and in, he's going to be pulled up and kind of away a little bit. Up and away, so a little dorsiflexion, a little abduction, which then at this mid-tarsal joint is going to start to lock things up. It's almost like a plane getting ready for takeoff right here. So we're still going to have some dorsiflexion there, but we're going to get some inversion. We're going to start to drive some inversion of that mid-tarsal joint because the subtalar joint is inverting and getting us a little of that relative AD kind of adduction of things, kind of close on up and get a little more congruent, get a little more stable. So mid-tarsal joint, relative adduction, inversion before we get some plantar flexion. That then allows this tibia and this fibula to start to laterally rotate, So we still have that good dorsiflex loading and inversion. Kind of throws us into that econcentric conversation, which we're going to have for a later date, which gets a little bit crazy. So we still have, I'll use my right leg as it matches up with this right. So we still have that dorsiflexion, we still have that translation of the tibia and the fibula up over the talus and kind of into the midfoot of that tibia, kind of transitioning. He starts to laterally rotate. So this calcaneus, it inverts as the midfoot, relatively speaking, is everting. Now, midfoot will follow the rear foot. There will be some inversion, but that great divide is that mid-tarsal joint, the separation of the rear foot to the midfoot. The forefoot, the metatarsals and the phalanges then are going to, first and the second ray, evert and plantar flex. Fourth and the fifth will they'll evert as well, but they're also going to dorsiflex because again we have this ringing out like effect in kind of the forefoot from first to the fifth rays. It gives us something solid, it gives us something very firm to be able to push off from. So transformational zone number 2, very, very interesting kind of phase of gait as we transition to the point of heel off to toe off. Oftentimes what you'll see transition-wise, people that are inefficient in kind of this phase of gait, is that you can go to the calcaneus, you can go to the subtalar joint, take a look at kind of the eversion. Are we getting that good frontal plane motion? You'll a lot of times see a fair amount of kind of medial heel whip, inability to kind of laterally rotate this tibia and fibula. It can be a lot of things kind of really gunked up, really gummed up, that are really prohibiting us from being able to smoothly transition through that TZ2 portion of gait. Not being able to lock up in this phase of gait, not being able to have that good load first, would be almost like running through this bowl of mashed potatoes. The body surely is going to compensate. It's going to go to a plane of motion where it's successful to compensate for deficits throughout the rest of the system. It's good for us to be able to not only check out the foot and the ankle, the biomechanical sequencing of kind of the foot and the ankle complex, as well as kind of the knee, but most importantly kind of that hip. Let's take a look at and let's see how that butt is involved. Let's take a look at how the thoracic spine and the shoulders are involved with that top-down loading and driver throughout this system, this Slinky-like system, this washcloth-like system that goes from head to toes, that enables this great sufficient load for us to be able to move properly. So I hope that you can really understand the importance of this load to explode first. So movement wise, again, is only a direct response to how well the body moves, or how well the body loads, which coincidentally is ultimately how it moves. So movement wise, if we see a lot of inefficiencies, inconsistencies, a lot of wear and tear, a lot of just things just not looking too smooth, not looking too crisp, we always need to go back to the sequencing of that load. We need to look at all the capsular kind of function of that ankle, of that subtalar joint, of that mid-tarsal joint. We need to look at how this tibia and this fibula, as that in TZ2, that tibia and that fibula continue to translate anteriorly, how that mortise, how that tibia and that fibula continue to kind of separate from each other. We'll have that fibula, which is kind of offset kind of posteriorly on a diagonal angle from that tibia. So importantly enough, I think the man who was in charge of designing our system and our body knew what he was doing when he said, hey, let's position that fibula kind of diagonally and kind of posteriorly back behind that tibia. Take advantage of the kind of that three-dimensional kind of torque-like system of kind of loading right there. So that fibula needs to, and that tibia need to separate. The fibula needs to kind of rotate on out laterally, and then the tibia needs to follow that. If we get things moving at the same direction, same speed at the same time, we get the phenomenon of relatively no motion. Transformational Zone 2 of Gait. Hope you enjoyed that little discussion. We're now in part B. Gonna head on into a little dialogue and a little kind of show and tell and a little kind of free play session in regards to a few of the activities that I'll usually go to in terms of some of my basic little nuggets, my little pearls, to really go after kind of helping the transition into that TZ2 of Gait for those that are a little bit inefficient and that can't quite kind of sequence it. We're going to use the arms as drivers, the upper extremities. We're going to use the position of the lower extremity and the activities and kind of those two kind of combinations with each other to drive and facilitate optimal and optimize efficient and consistent Gait in TZ2. Hope you guys enjoy that part, and let's head on into a little free play.